It's a great pleasure to see all of you today gathered in this first meeting and first webinars of the STREAM Network. I'm Michel Alhadeff-Jones. I'm the Executive Director of the Sunkhronos Institute. I'm a Senior Lecturer and Program Director of the Certificate of Advanced Studies, Life Narrative and Biographical Coaching at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. I'm also an adjunct associate professor in adult learning and leadership at Teachers College, Columbia University. And I'm very, very glad to be co-hosting this meeting with my dear colleagues, Fadia Dakka and Sabine Schmidt-Lauff, who will introduce themselves in a short moment. So today I'm one of the three co-conveners of the ESREA Network, Spaces, Times, and the Rhythms of the Education of Adults and its Movement. And I'm particularly happy to launch this, the activity of this network with all of you after over a year of preparation. So today the program is the following one. I'm going to just say a few words to introduce ESREA, the European Society on Research in Education of Adults, and more specifically the STREAM Network. And then we'll discuss why we took the initiative to create this new network and how the three of us, with Fadia Dakka and Sabine Schmidt-Lauff, relate to this project and what may be our expectation regarding the activity of this network. And we'll also open the floor so that we can gather also your insights, your questions, and your desires and needs regarding this new network. We'll also take the time to discuss the relevance of the theme of this Research Symposium Series, transition. And also we'll take a few minutes to discuss about the notion of calibration that we choose as a angle to think about and study the phenomena of transition in the field of adult education. So we are going to try to alternate between a dialogue between the three of us and open floor with the possibility to have input, questions, and reflection and reactions from the audience. I'm really, really glad to see so many friendly faces from all around the world, quasi. So it's really nice to have this opportunity for exchange. And that's only the beginning, obviously. So to proceed today, we'll be assisted by Gaia Del Negro, who is an associate researcher at the Sunkhronos Institute and an independent researcher associated to the University of Milano Bicocca in Italy. And Monica Stab, who is the new community manager and online learning assistant at the Sunkhronos Institute, who will also assist us throughout this Research Symposium Series. And I thank them for their assistance and their help. They will manage the chat and they will assist us in the regulation of our exchange. So I encourage you to use from now on the chat to share your thinking and questions and to intervene when we'll open the floor to discuss. Two more things. Although the main language used in this encounter is English, if some of you are intimidated or do not master enough English as language, feel free to intervene with your mother tongue or with another language, and we'll try to find a way to translate without using AI. But I guess among us, there are enough people who are bilingual to find a way to translate if needed, from French, from German, from Italian, at least. Also, and that's the second remark, the meeting is recorded, and we hope to be able to post the recording online throughout this year, but we'll edit it so that all the exchanges and intervention from the audience won't be appearing online. Okay, so I'm going to start right away by saying a few words about ESREA. So the European Society for Research on the Education of Adults has been founded in 1991 to create a forum for research on adult education in a context when European countries were going through significant cultural and political transformation. So ESREA's mission is to support the advancements of high-quality research on the education of and learning of adults in Europe by sustaining cooperation among researchers in the European context conceived in the broadest geographical terms, but also sustaining development of research and dissemination of results in all areas of adult and continuing education. It's also aiming at sustaining training of early researcher, doctoral researcher, and young scholars, and continuing professional development of researchers, and enhance the relationship with other European organizations and the appropriate national organizations. So ESREA's core activities rely on 13 research networks. Other associations would call that special interest group. The organization of a triennial conference, publications, including an open access journal called RELA, and the support for PhD students, as well as a newsletter. So the 13 research networks sustain active cooperation among researchers through regular seminars, joint publication, and training of early researchers, which leads me to the STREAM network. So in 2022, 3 symposia around the themes space, time, and rhythms in adult education were organized during the ESREA 2022 Triennial Conference held in Milan, in Italy. The enthusiastic participation in the symposia and the sustained interest that generated among colleagues was instrumental to the creation of a forum for debate where contributions could be explored in a longer format. So in 2023, I took the initiative with the Temporalities, Rhythms, and Complexity Lab that I'm leading at the Sunkhronos Institute to organize an online research symposium series, including research presented in Milan and additional contribution for a total of 10 lectures. Over 220 scholars and practitioners registered to attend these events from over 20 countries. It was a sign we were touching significant issues. So with Fadia Dakka and Sabine Schmidt-Lauff, we decided to give ourselves the means to sustain this momentum and constitute a dedicated network that was officially formalized and launched in February 2023 with the agreement of the ESREA Steering Committee. I'm just going to put in the chat the link if you're interested to buy the Research Symposium Series we held last year. And you'll find also the videos of the presentation if you're interested in the topic. So regarding the STREAM network, as indicated by its name, it focuses on space, time, and rhythms as key aspects and determinants in any human processes and movements. References to those notions are ubiquitous and transversal themes in current research in adult education. Recent developments in educational research have shown the significance of considering changes taking place in the policy, practice, empirical and theoretical study of education, considering the way people perceive, conceive, and experience space and time. Both indeed represent critical lenses to describe and interpret phenomena through which autonomy, identity, and inequalities are produced or reproduced in society. Closely related to these two notions, rhythm is also increasingly acknowledged as a critical notion to conceive fluid, dynamic, and complex phenomena typical of those constitutive of culturally diverse educational processes such as transformation, professionalization, emancipation, identity development, and so on. Also, the historicity of educational phenomena is marked by multifarious and variable movements and changes. Temporal facets in adult education are woven into political norms of lifelong and life-wide learning, the fluidity of phenomena, evolving modes of teaching and learning, such as online or hybrid, and experiences such as temporal alienation, environmental issues, present fragmentations, or future dystopia, etc. One of the objectives of the STREAM network is to question systematically the assumptions about time-space relation shaping the praxis of adult education through its heterogeneous expressions and movements, such as formal and informal education, in higher education, in vocational education, in self-development, and so on. The goal is to raise questions about the relationship between situated context and global processes, including emancipation, equity, and marginalization. Furthermore, the network explores the multiplicity of temporalities and rhythms that inform and constitute educational settings and processes, and the effects inherent to their antagonistic and complementary dimensions on adult learning and professional development. The aim of the STREAM network is thus to explore critically how to conceive the influences and movements of spatial, temporal, and rhythmic configurations through which adults learn, transform, and develop themselves in an ever-changing world. What is at stake is to determine how to identify, interpret, and evaluate the relations through which space and time influence educational processes, including the way they are lived subjectively, how they are framed in modernity, and the rhythmic configuration they may display. In conclusion, I would say that the general vision of this network is twofold. First, to provide researchers and practitioners working in the field of adult and higher education an institutionalized environment and an ongoing agenda to share and discuss recent contribution to an emerging field of research. And second, to valorize research conducted in different linguistic, cultural, and geographic areas in order to highlight proximities, reinforce connections, explore differences, and ultimately strengthen international collaborations around theory and empirical studies related to the study of space, time, and rhythm in adult education. So if you're interested to also discover what the other networks of ESREA are doing, you can visit the website where you will find also information about the STREAM network. It's esrea.org. So to introduce the dialogue we're going to have now with Fadia and Sabine, I would add a personal note about how I would relate to this new network and the activity that we're envisioning through it. So on a personal note, and to start this dialogue, I would add that for me personally, the aim of this network is to socialize, share, and develop the work and research I've been conducting for the last 14 years. Those who know me know that I've been quite involved in the development of an international community of researchers interested in Jack Medzero's contribution on transformative learning theory, both in North America and in Europe. I've also been committed to the development of life history and biographical approaches and methods in adult education. And by the way, both transformative processes and biographical approaches have their own network within ESREA. So my interest for critical pedagogies and transformative learning theory and my work with methods such as educational biography led me to focus on the close relations between the experience of time in the everyday life and throughout the lifespan and critical and emancipatory processes. To put it simply, the exercise of critical reflection, which is for me at the core of the praxis of adult education, requires time and space, and what I observe is that we are struggling nowadays to provide both to our learners and to protect the slow pace required to produce good research. So the experience of time and space is fundamental, and it's fundamentally a political issue. The ways we relate to space and time express power dynamics. So my assumption is that we need new strategies and new theories to study those in the field of adult education. Such observations led me to write a book a few years ago titled Time and the Rhythms of Emancipatory Education, which crystallized my thinking and brought me to focus on the rhythmic and processual aspect of learning, transformational and developmental phenomena, and to define the grounds of a new form of critical pedagogy inspired by rhythm analysis. My conviction today is that contemporary forms of alienation, whether experienced individually or collectively through an oppressing feeling of acceleration or the divide of different moments of one's existence, or the pressure to reconnect with a damaged and deteriorating environment, requires one to take time to reconsider how we balance and regulate the rhythms through which we develop ourselves day after day throughout one's existence, individually and collectively. Practically speaking, my reflections are located at the crossroad between what I'm learning from adult learners' life histories, focusing on the way they learn and evolve, my own autoethnographical observations, and my theoretical research around rhythm theories and rhythm analysis. And although there is a fair amount of people who connect with such topics of study, there is no formal community dedicated to such research. And that is the main reason why I personally felt it would be important to create such a network, to provide us with space and time to conceive, theorize, and explore new methodologies to promote and enhance what I call rhythmic intelligence, that is, people's ability to individually and collectively regulate and critically reflect on the rhythms through which transformational processes shape and constrain our life. So I'm going to put a few links in the chat if you're interested by those few information. And without losing more time, I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Fadia and Sabine, so that they can introduce themselves and also say how they relate to the creation of this network.
Well, thank you, Michel. That was an excellent introduction to the network, but also to the history and the story behind it. I just want to add a few things to that the creation of a network is an incredible labor of love. And what we don't see about a network and about a launch of a network is the endless, intense conversations that precede that, the exchanges over the years, of which I am incredibly grateful. But also a particular thank you to you, Michel, as an incredible engine behind all this, as the tangible demonstration that these kind of initiatives are possible when there is inspiration, when there is generosity, when there is a true passion for research and for building a research community. So my being part of this network is a privilege, and is a privilege, if I may add, sprinkle of politics to that. It's a privilege in contemporary academia to be part of these kinds of conversations and these kinds of initiatives that more and more happen in spite of the systems and the sector we are all toiling in, as in naturally being enabled by the systems we're in. So the first thing I want to say is a word of thank you, and thank you for being this kind of engine, this nice colleague and friend to work with, and someone who's interested in pushing the agenda forward with rigor and passion. So briefly, that's my history of, coming to be and become an academic interested in questions of time and space, and particular rhythm in education. My name is Fadia Dakka, and I am a senior research fellow in education based in Birmingham, UK, for those of you who don't know me. Also a visiting associate professor at the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning in the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim, and an associate researcher at the Sunkhronos Institute led by Michel. My interests and my contribution to this network, really briefly, lie at the intersection of philosophy, sociology, and theory of higher education. I use rhythm analysis, so the interest in rhythm and rhythm theories, but in particular rhythm analysis as a paradigm to research the field of critical university studies, because I'm interested in how university adapt, transform, reproduce themselves essentially through intense competition and commodification, which are the ciphers of the zeitgeist of our time in many ways. But more than that, I'm interested in what this means at the institutional and individual level, and interested in the psychosocial implications for that. For instance, what happens to the mental health and the well-being, and the existence and coexistence of people working in the university, staff and students together. My interest in this network in particular is twofold. methodologically speaking, a network, as it has been, greatly introduced by Michel, that is on times, spaces, rhythms of adult education and its movements, opens up avenues, in my views, for cross-disciplinary research that is guided at its heart and fundamental level by a concern with lived temporality that could be broadly interpreted as the unfolding of human and more than human transformations and transitions. Secondly, and more personally, if you like, I'm interested in exploring how we can use rhythm as a philosophical, but also as an ethical, political, analytical category that helps us navigate through and make sense of what we witness as a number of intersecting highly complex, multiscalar changes in the global arena. So my expectation and hope is that this network, by gathering scholars from different disciplinary backgrounds and different regions in the world, hopefully, as we begin to see from the composition of the audience today, might contribute to theorize transitional processes by elucidating those macro, meso, and micro dimensions of transition that are part and parcel of a veritable relational force field in tension with contradictory societal, political, environmental, and cultural and educational thrusts. So my interest and hope for this network and expectation of this network will be that we will see a genuine interest in the scalar dimension, in the different scale of changes. I'm interested in what happens, the changes that as we experience in real life happens all at once. But what happens and how can we disentangle the macro, the meso, the micro dimension, and crucially, learn from them and use and test and think together and collectively about concepts, ideas, frameworks that might be mobilized to better understandings of these changes to this effect. So I'll stop here for now and pass it on to my colleague Sabine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel, and thank you, Fadia. You have said so many important things, and I am really with you at most of these stages. So what is left now to me is not that I will repeat all these things, but I want to give you a short impression of me, my person, my interest and relation to these different networks we are involved in. So my name is Sabine Schmidt-Lauff. I hold the professorship for continuing education and lifelong learning at the Helmut Schmidt University. It is one of two federal armed forces universities we have here in Germany. I'm here since 2016. And I met, I'm not sure, Michel, the very first time. It was also in one of these triennial ESREA conferences, and from that point on, so I think we are light connected over years, and I'm so happy that I can share now my interests of research with you and with the whole participants and the community here. So my main interests are normally goes to professional identity and professional acting in adult and continuing education. And by this, I very often meet, I would say I could name it maybe a kind of a professional sensitivity for the huge topic and theme of temporality in adult education. And to make it more explicit, I share this research interest with a huge community, also with the young research, because the second key aspect of my work is since several years now an international comparative concept on lifelong learning, and I'm working in European and international contexts in schools or exchange programs with master students here. And I'm very happy that I meet some colleagues from these contexts here as well today. And since more than 25 years now, a particular focus of my research is on temporal and time-related challenges to learning across or throughout the lifespan in a globalized and nowadays more and more virtualized modern world. 2 years ago, it was really a surprise for me and also a great honor that out of this work, I was inducted into the International Adult and Continuing Education Hall of Fame. And for me, it was a kind of honoring what we are all doing here, like Michel said, and also Fadia pointed out that we work as engines, or we work like advocates for the questions about time and temporality. And we try to understand and exchange our meanings of temporal aspects in very diverse contexts. So, and second, I'm also a member of an Asia-Europe Education and Research Hub for Lifelong Learning. And this network especially points out lifelong learning transitions. So maybe this is one reason that we put on our title for the second year now of this symposia series, the topic of transitions. So important for me and my work are always the people. Therefore, this network is like a kind of space or a home, so to say, for me to connect with people from different countries in different disciplines with different approaches to time and adult education and learning throughout the life. For me, it is a possibility to meet other perspectives on this topic under the large common umbrella of time, space, temporality, and rhythm. And by meeting other perspectives, it is a kind of exchange, and it is a kind of continuously trying to understand what are the concepts, the approaches, the methodologies, the semantics, etc. behind. So for me, adult education is embedded in a critical and at times militant discourse tradition we have in Germany. To give you a keyword is Bildung. Bildung implies at one hand a resistant as well as on the other hand utopian core moment. So adult education as Bildung, understood as Bildung, is part of a democratic tradition which is characterized by very fragile relationships between subject and society, individual and world, self and structure, etc., etc. And transitions are clear markers for these fragile conditions in various places. So when I started my work on research and work and on temporalities in adult education, I started in a project about time policies for lifelong learning. And for me, the learners stood, they kept a little bit invisible in this. And within years, I developed, and this is still in process, it is not finalized, a heuristic concept and a theoretical model of time about implications for learning between two levels. There are temporal basic references and there are individual self-relations to time. For example, Michel elaborated a little bit. So one of the temporal basic general reference, it's a categorical reference, I would say, is the historicity of education. So, and the interconnection for about the between past, present, and future in all learning is another temporal dimension, I would say. And the individual self-relations to time are, for example, the idea in modernity, or not the idea, the saying very often, especially in empirical databases, that time is a kind of a refugee category. There is no time for several things, or never enough time. Or also the biographical changing, I would say, time concurrences for learning in different life courses or life phases. So this model, I still try to understand and to build up a systematic understanding. And I'm really happy that we are here together in this STREAM series symposium. And this is now what I would like to say at that moment.
What I would say to the question, why do we think transition is an important notion and how we position ourselves regarding it? Well, For me, referring to the notion of transitions allow one to put the stress on the processual dimension of learning, transformational and developmental process, rather than considering such processes through their output or their product as static phenomena. So it invites one to adopt a dynamic approach. It is omnipresent in my work using life history and biographical approach because people, when they evoke their own life, often refer to moments or periods of transition or how they move from one position to another in their personal or professional lives. So from a theoretical perspective, references to this notion re-emerged in my work when I started working on crisis theory during the COVID-19 pandemics. Transitions often refer to perturbations or crises that destabilize a system and trigger changing and transformational dynamics. So referring to the idea of transition leads one to question how we conceive or respond to such perturbation, whether they come from the inside, if you think about biological changes that affect our body, for instance, or from the outside, whether due to a pandemic or due to social changes. What I've learned from my work around the notion of crisis is that transitions operate within systems that are shaped by antagonistic forces that display tensions, oppositions, contradictions. Think about what the pandemics revealed of contradictions and opposite interests. The evolution of those tensions also reveals recurring feedback processes that either inhibit or reinforce the capacity to cope with changes and eventually lead to the reorganization that manifests significant transformation. And that often we think about transformation or transition, we associate that to the end result, where in fact, I think what is really critical is really the ongoing process. And so transitions reveal patterns of thinking, of behaving, and relating to each other. They also express recurring and repetitive phenomena that unfold in the everyday life, such as routines or habits implemented to cope with changes. And so they eventually lead to thresholds that lead to significant transformation. So what fascinates me with transition is that their output is never fully predictable. That is why they are often experienced as ordeals, because we never know whether they'll reveal our weaknesses and inability to face specific situations, or at the opposite, our strength and our capacity to transcend and sublime a crisis. We saw all of that with the COVID crisis. How many hopes that we would finally experience a transition toward new ways of living, and at the same time, how many disappointments to observe our collective failure to change some of the worst aspects of our current life. So what I've learned is that transitions require the capacity to symbolize and put words on the changes we are experiencing in order to envision new ways of being. That is one of the key functions of adult education, to provide learners resources to find new words, new images, and a new imaginary to envision what was unimaginable before. So transitions also takes time, and they are made of rhythmic movement characterized by ebbs and flows, trials and errors. The mistake we often make is to reduce transitions to their output, what has been transformed. And what seems to me the most important is the unfolding through which transitions emerge and evolve, as it reveals and expresses power dynamics within ourselves, between our different tendencies, and also with others that are fundamentally fluid and deserve to be better understood. And that's why I think the different entry point that we chose through the guest speaker who are going to intervene in this series hopefully will highlight the fluidity and the inscription of transition in configuration of space and times that are continuously moving. So that's for my personal interest in that topic.
In my case, I come to transition and I look at transition and liminality from the perspective of higher education research, which is my field of expertise and my field of practice as well. So I connect transition on the one hand to the idea of this kind of state of permanent crisis that you connected with transition of the university as a modern institution, a crisis that, as everybody knows, or everybody who's in the field or close to the field of critical university studies knows ultimately emanates from the capitalist, patriarchal, colonial state, the ramifications of which we see reverberating across the whole of the educational establishment and in the university. So on the other hand, and to a certain extent, examining these kind of university crises and transitions and activism as epiphenomena of global challenges is a necessary precondition to understand, navigate, and even promote a different kind of transitions towards, for instance, alternative, more sustainable ecologies of knowledge production, but also of coexistence. What I find fascinating and what I hope this network will help me clarify is a double bind of the study on transition, which is, what Lefebvre would define as coming to a problem both as being close to practice and close to existence and very close to the experiential, and at the same time trying to abstract a way to quote, start with the full consciousness in abstract in order to arrive at the concrete. So I see research on transitions and transformations as performing this pendulum movement between what we learn from the experience from going through transition and how this knowledge can then inform theorization of transitions, for instance, through the lens of rhythm, the constellations of critical moments, to just name a few of the theoretical tenets that might help us. So once again, for me, as rhythm analysis, I look at as it continues to be a source of insight in enabling an illumination of this kind of dialectic movement between the micro to the macro and vice versa. That is also creating a tension that is inescapable when we talk about transitions and try to understand what transitions are. At the same time, that kind of novel methodological approach, or rhythmic or fluid methodological approach to transition enables us to capture or to get closer to the messiness of lived experiences in the attempt of human beings. And that's what also captivates me and interests me, to make sense and find provisional stability in the uncertainty that characterizes transitional phases. And in that, I think, as I said, that I'm particularly interested in higher education research. I have an interest in and a stake in doctoral education, for instance, which is, a particular site of transition and transformation, where the academic identities and the kind of deep learning about the self and the disciplines are formed and forged through subsequent crises, rites of passages, that kind of constellation of the critical moments that has rhythmic features. So once again, for me, there is an interest in theorizing and better understanding transitions from within, as something that you touched on, as in from the perspective and the vantage point of what happens during a crisis rather than before and after the change. So here is my take on and hope for future theorizations and understandings of transition.
So what is for me important in the notion of transition, and this is maybe different to what the Michel and Fadia said before, it's different to the overemphasis, question mark, of crisis. I'm really much interested in, are there positive perturbations which might lead us to transitions and learning located in transitions as well. First of all, I would say transition is in contrast to the common concept of change. Very often it is used similar. It is in contrast because in change, it seems to be that there is a clearly identifiable starting point and a clearly identifiable arrival point. here I'm fully with Michel, who said the output is never fully clear. And transition in this is not a kind of a fixed point or a resting place, but it is more, for me, it's a kind of a relational term, and transition emphasizes the moment of, I would say, movement in relation to the different stations or processes. I'm not fully clear about this. For me, transition is a figuration in which neither the starting point nor the final destination is available in advance. But what does this mean? And how is learning located in? Learning can be kind of a movement of search. We have in German the term we talk about Suchbewegung. I like this term very, very much. That learning is maybe a Suchbewegung in the sense of reciprocal. So this means coming again. It's maybe not constantly, but it's continuously. And it is always constituting me and myself different from the stage where I started. So for my researcher's heart, it is very, very fascinating how little, I would say, there are differences between transformation, turning points, transitions, changes, etc., etc. Very often this is also mixed. And to think of transitions differently a little bit brings me to the idea of for me, it is a term which marks infinite, fluid, processual moments of, I don't know, orienting. Or I like the quotation of a colleague, it's brushing the usual course of things, running kind in a linear forward time movement, brushing these things against the grain. So it is a kind of a sudden entering into a reflexive perception of the process of progression. And this is to experience a very specific relationship to change. It is a very specific quality, which is for me, what is for me meant in the term transition. I would use here the idea of it's a kind of a resonant quality. This term is elaborated by Hartmut Rosa. I'm not fully with him in his book, but I like the idea of that there is a kind of a quality of relationship that puts us into contact with change and not with further alienation in the change. So resonance is the positive response within and for transition as searching movements.